So, good evening, viewers. We are at Henry's Interactive Talk Show, where we bring you a story right from Amsterdam. And this is such an amazing person that I've met over the weekend. And it's been so fantastic being around her for about a week now.
Yeah.
So she'll introduce herself and start by telling us a bit of her personal story, from how did you start, and I'll tell you what she does and why she's here today. So you can tell us your name.
Okay. I'm Xina,
Yeah.
and I live in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and I work as a storyteller. And
You work as a
I work
storyteller.
as a storyteller and spoken word artist.
So did you started like a storyteller, or you started doing something different from storytelling?
I started doing something completely
What was
different.
this?
I started first working as a geriatric nurse.
Yes.
Then I worked in community development, bringing together communities, generations, working in conflicts with neighborhoods, with generations. And then in 2014, I suddenly decided, I don't want to do this anymore. And I quit everything.
So could you say something motivated you into doing this, or were you even a poet by the time you were being a nurse?
I was writing poetry, but I was hiding it in a drawer.
Okay.
Like nobody,
Where were you
nobody saw
reciting
it.
these things? Where were you reciting this?
I was not
poem?
reciting anything. I was writing it and just keeping
And
it
hiding.
and hiding.
So
like
where do you derive your poems from?
my own experiences. It was mainly my own experiences, the ways I looked at the world. It was a way to like process emotions, process how I saw things in the world. When I look back, I use storytelling a lot, but I used it like for fundraising.
Yes.
Like I would use stories to make people go like, oh yeah, that's good, I'll give you money. Because the stories work so much better. They touch people's hearts.
Yes.
So I look back, I use stories a lot. I also use them a lot in community development. If like young people and old people are in a conflict in a neighborhood, when they hear each other's stories, the conflicts will go
So
away.
did you went back to study this, or
No.
Yes.
I decided literally in one evening,
Yes.
suddenly I wanted to do something different for a few years and I didn't know what. And then one evening it occurred to me, if I hold on to what I am,
Yes.
I can never be something else. So I decided in one evening, I quit. I quit my business, I quit project management, I quit writing, I quit everything. And I'm giving myself a year to find something new. And in that year, I did a workshop storytelling, and I thought, this is it.
So this is how you shift from being a nurse into starting serious storytelling. So how's the journey been?
It's been fantastic. It's been, I mean, I make a lot less money.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me more, because maybe I would want to go there straight away.
Well, I mean, as a project management manager,
Yes.
I made quite a good money. As a storyteller, you make less money.
So were there specific projects that were running?
When I was working as a project
Yes.
manager, yeah. I had quite large social projects, national projects that I was running. A lot aimed at fighting loneliness amongst old people, helping young people develop abilities to be able to participate more. A lot of projects like that. Volunteer work, things like this, I did a lot of, yeah.
So did you ever had a privilege to start your own institution?
Yeah, I had my own company for about a decade. I ran my own business.
Still running to date?
No, I quit it in 2014. I quit everything. I was successful and I quit everything.
Why am I saying that you definitely being a quitter? Why? This is the second time you're saying you quitted something.
It was the best decision I made for myself. It was really like everyone was telling me, but you're good at what you do, you're successful at what you do is important, you shouldn't stop. That's what everyone was telling me. And yeah, I decided to stop anyway, and now I do something else, and I'm good at what I do, and I'm successful in what I do. And it's something completely different. And For me, the best part is I am part of the community I build now.
Okay.
In the past, I used to come into other communities. I would help build communities for other people, and then I would go. And now I build storytelling communities. I'm part of it. And for me, I think it's smaller. It's not these big national projects. It's just, every month we come together, 50 people, we share stories, we connect, we do workshops. And there's something about storytelling that when people come and they listen to stories, their brains start working on the same wavelength.
The same wavelength, yes.
And this creates a sense of connection. We're all having the same experience at the same time, and we're all realizing that, you're a Kenyan man, I'm a Belgian Dutch woman. There are many differences, but we're human beings.
Yes.
And when we hear each other's stories, we kind of remember we're all just human beings.
Yes.
And we have the basic same needs and the basic same experiences. And in where I live, loneliness is a real big issue, like especially amongst young people. And so these evenings, you really see people connect. And a lot of times, like young people in their early 20s will come and hug me and thank me and say like, oh, I really needed a place that feels like home.
For these workshops, do you have the audience, or you just come like a group of storytellers and you sit together and start just talking and telling these beautiful stories?
So most of the evenings I do are together with theaters.
Yes.
And we just but it's cozy. We have like a meal first together, and then there's pillows and relaxed. I usually have like 4 storytellers and some music. We always start with a little question that the audience talks with each other, so we break the fourth wall.
The fourth wall, yes.
So there's really...
Where you bring in certain things, like how do you look at these? How do
Yeah,
you look at this, to develop a story.
Well, just mainly just a question to the audience to wake them up and connect with us.
Okay.
And then usually it's around a theme. We have a theme of the evening, so all the stories are inspired by the theme and the music. So we have a story, some music, some story. We have a break, we hang out, story, music, story. And then at the end, we have a hat that people can throw their name in.
Yes.
And they can spontaneously come and tell a story.
Yes.
And this is where the new storytellers are often born.
So you can confirm that actually storytelling is a beautiful thing. That it can also earn someone a serious living. You can live a beautiful life just basing your life on storytelling. But again, where do you derive your stories from?
Anywhere. So sometimes there are stories that I hear that like old folk tales or mythologies, and then I spend time to get to know and understand the story. Like, say I would hear a story here, like a Kenyan story that I really like. Before I can tell it, I need to learn a lot. I need to learn about the culture, what the meaning of the aspects of the story are. So I take time to get to know the story.
Yes.
So part is that stories I hear that I'm like, oh, this story speaks to me. Sometimes it's a story that really doesn't speak to me, like makes me angry. Then I'm curious. I want to get to know the story. Other times, there's stories that come to me, personal experiences that I then question, trying to understand why I had an argument with someone or a relationship with parents or something like that could lead to a story. Sometimes it could be something in history, a historic character I'm interested in.
Yes.
And other times it's really what we did in the workshop Saturday was really just playing and seeing what story grows out of an object and a little experience. We could say like, oh, here's a palm tree. What is the story of this palm tree? And just through play find a story. Yeah.
Okay. So in most cases, you definitely even develop a story on your way home from work.
Possibly. Just a lot of times what happens is there's something that intrigues me, like an idea, a thought, an experience.
You write them down?
No. I kill them if I write them down. They
So
are
where do you store
living.
them?
They are
Where do you store them?
in my body. Like, where do you store your experiences? I make some.
You see, these are long stanzas, kind of thing to recite, and,
No,
and
but-
you see when you stand and you want to tell a story, you must have a rhythm and how it starts and how it ends. So if you're telling me you don't store it somewhere, I'm wondering how do you keep on rehearsing over it?
So I build the world of the story.
Yes.
Like I imagine, I experience, I build this whole world, and then I make it smaller. And so I bring it down to like 9 pictures, 6 pictures, 3 pictures, 2 pictures, one, and it always comes down to one object.
Yes.
So for me, this object stands for the story. In the beginning, it was a thing I had. Now it's
Yes.
often just an idea.
Yes.
And then when I want to tell the story, I remember the object, and it just like it unfolds. I don't know how to explain it. It's like the story unfolds, and I'm
Building up,
experiencing
yes.
it in the moment of
And
telling.
you want to keep on talking. You want to keep on
Because
saying.
it's like pictures in my head. It's like a movie in my head. And so if I write words, it becomes words.
Yes.
But if it's a movie, then I'm telling you what I'm seeing, which for me is exciting. It also means that what I tell you is going to be different than what I tell someone else,
Yes.
because they have different interests. So the way a story comes out depends on who I'm telling it to. So at the workshop today, 2 days ago at the Cleopatra Theatre,
Yes. Yes.
there I was telling to like 15 people.
Yes.
The story will come out different than if I were to tell in the theater to 1,000
I like
people.
the last story that you did,
The poem.
the poem story. So that was one of the best for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know one of your best. So do you have one of your favorite?
That's my favorite. I think my favorite spoken word piece is that one because it's about storytelling.
Do
Yeah,
you still remember it?
of course.
So we can
Yeah.
have it.
You want me to tell?
Yeah.
Okay.
I need to look at this and okay guys, let us listen to this story. This is quite an amazing story that I had over the weekend, and it's still stuck in me. So I want you guys to have a listen to it and then tell me what you think about this story.
Where does your story begin? Maybe your story began just now when you started watching this video, or this morning when you woke up. But probably your story began much earlier than that. Maybe your story began the very... Oh, I messed up. Maybe your story began with a seemingly inconsequential decision that would determine the rest of your fate and lead to you being the person you are right now, right here in this moment. The decision to turn left instead of right, to look up just when you did, to order strawberry ice cream, and you may never know what that decision was. Or maybe your story began the very first time you took agency and decided to do what you wanted to do instead of what you were told. That moment you looked your mother in the eye and put the fistful of dirt in your mouth anyway. Or maybe your story began on the day that you were born, or the day you were conceived, or the day your parents met, or the very first time an ancestor imagined your existence and laughingly joked about a great-great-great-great-grandchild from now. Where do stories begin? Does Little Red Riding Hood's story really begin the moment she puts on her red cloak and sets out into the woods with a basket full of goodies for her grandma? Did she not wake up that morning? Or go to bed the night before? When she was a baby, did her grandmother not hold her in her arms for the very first time, forging the bond that would lead to her setting out into the forest on that fateful day? Searching for the beginning of story, we keep uncovering more story. Further and further back in time we go to before we painted on the walls of caves to finally find the first story ever told. And from that story, all other stories would grow. So perhaps what we call your story and my story are not separate stories at all, but rather chapters in the story. And for the story to be complete, your story too must be told. So tell your story. Tell your stories to your loved ones so they may hold them in their hearts, and tell your stories to strangers even though they'll probably only remember parts. Tell your stories to the birds so they may sing them in the forest, and tell your stories to the clouds so they may sweep them over the mountains and drop them like rain on the plains.
Hey!
Tell your stories to the rivers so they may carry them across the oceans and spread them around the world. Tell your stories so that one day, in a future far from now, a stranger who has never seen your face, nor heard your name, nor visited any of the places where you came, will tell a story that holds in its core an element of your essence. For within them all stories hold parts of the souls of those by whom they have been told. So hold the stories that you're told. Hold them gently like loved ones. Do not dismiss them with disdain, nor treat them like something you can own, nor rip them unthinking from their home. No, hold the story that you're told. And like a friend, sit with it by the fire. Walk together through forests and fields and along the shores of lakes. Be curious, inquire, until you know the story through and through, and when you know it like you know your oldest friend, then and only then, add shapes and colors of your own and let the story go, and be the vessel it has always been, holding within the experience and knowledge of generations that came before, and now also yours. And so, stories entwine. And what we call the beginnings of stories are perhaps not so much beginnings, but rather moments in space and time where we join the story. Just like I join your story now, and you join mine. So, if the beginning of your story is not so easily found, perhaps the question should rather be, where does your story end? And the answer to that question is so much easier to give. Your story ends when it is no longer told. So tell your story. Tell your story, let it free and let it fly, let it change in shape and size, let it, but do not let it die. Tell your story, tell my stories, tell our story.
Why do I feel like you just attacked me and all the stories all about me? Of course, I will tell my story one day.
It's so important that we tell our stories and that our stories go on, that we learn from the past, that generation upon generation passes on the knowledge and their experience, that it changes. And for me, this is why it's so important not to write them down. Let them change with the times, let them change with the places. Let me take a story from Europe that speaks to you for a different reason than it spoke to me. And then you take it and you spread it here and it moves around.
There's a deep connection that you get from your audience, because right now I feel like I'm really getting into the story thing and I just want to listen more and more. Is this a common thing that happens to most of your audience? That they would want to sit you down and still talk to you?
Keep hearing stories, coming back, hearing more, And I find it so sad. So often people are like, when's the next storytelling night? And I'm like, you can just also ask me for a story. You don't have to wait for me to be in a theater. If you see me in the street and you want a story, ask me for a story.
Because you can tell story wherever place you are, you're
anywhere.
walking, you're doing anything, you can tell a story.
And I like it best because when it's just meeting someone, I can see which story wants to come up, which story wants to be told in this moment.
So guys, shortly, you've heard from her, and that is such a wonderful story that I believe is part of my story. It's part of my story, but I will tell it one day. And so far, we're having the fast. We're just going to have a short break, and we're coming right back, so you stay tuned. We'll be right back. Thank you.
All right.